to leave. Then I stumble out in the cold, as lonely can be.
Barry, it is Friday. What is with that lonely intro ballad there? I need a cocktail. We're supposed to be high energy right now with a lot of joy. Alas, I'm not Sarah Longwell. I'm Tim Miller. You're stuck with me. Apologize for being a few minutes late. I'm here with the great Elizabeth Neumann. Elizabeth.
Hello. Happy Friday.
Where are you coming from? Where are you calling in from? Zooming in?
From my office with the apple green walls that everybody seems to love in Northern Virginia.
My house outside is kind of a similarly apple green.
Yeah,
what's a good pair color with that? Like a purple? I've been trying to think about what I can trim.
That is opposite of the color wheel. I've chosen the blue chair to maybe tone it down a bit. I didn't really choose the wall color. We moved in and it was like that, kind of bright. So we'll see. I have designs to change it at some point, but there's like a fan following of the wall color. It's
really?
I don't want to offend anybody.
Okay,
yeah.
Well, I'll have to get on that listserv. Thank you so much for doing this again, as always. I want to talk to you. We'll get in a little bit to the town halls. We'll get in a little bit to give everybody a little look at the state of the race, what RVAT's up to, what our plan is for the last 3 weeks. We'll get into that at the end. I'll take your questions. If you want to ask me about the Rolling Stone article I just wrote about the depressing future of the GOP, I can talk about that. But first, I want to talk to Elizabeth about two things in the news. One, the president last night said that he didn't know anything about Q, and then actually kind of corrected himself and said he knew one thing about Q, which is that they don't like pedophiles, and he's with them on that. You have talked at length about your time in DHS and how you saw this kind of rise of conspiracy and domestic kind of right-wing extremism. What was your reaction to his thought last night, just broadly, and then we can kind of get into the details.
Well, I mean, you almost have to contrast it with, he clearly knew he had to condemn white supremacy.
Right.
They must have seen poll numbers that indicated, hey, this actually does matter, that you're losing support because you cannot clearly, consistently condemn white supremacy. So at least he said the words. It is a little too late because the folks that believe these white supremacy conspiracy theories tend to believe that he has to say that now because of his election, but he's really for them, right? So they still interpret it as a wink and a nod, even though he said those words. And as a counterterrorism person, I care less about what the speaker's intent is and more about what the threat actor heard,
right.
And the damage is done. But at least he tried. You contrast that with QAnon. He would like, how hard is this? So there could be two options. Either his national security staff have not briefed him, which at that point they should all be fired because this has been a problem for some time and it really has come up multiple times for him in public settings. So he should have been briefed on what this thing is and why it's not real and that he should condemn it. So I want to give the national security team a little bit of a benefit of the doubt that they probably did try to brief him. And more likely, he recognizes that most people that belong to Q are his supporters. In fact, this conspiracy theory has grown exponentially in the last 3 to 4 months. We have intelligence groups that monitor chat rooms and conversations, and they are sounding alarm bells, and they are tying it, that Q is tying its work to directly related to the election. So there's this unfortunate merging of not just a really bizarre conspiracy theory and how Trump is their savior and he's going to save all of the children, but now it's also tied to the election. And so you've already seen a few adherents, by my count, about 6 different people have taken steps across criminal thresholds to carry out acts or plots of violence in the name of whatever the Q ideology is. And it's usually around the space of they believe that children are being trafficked, that there's pedophilia rings, and they feel, justifiably, if you actually believe that there are kids that are being subjected to child sex trafficking, of course you want to go save them. Like it's you understand the hard side of it, but they take matters into their own hands and they commit these acts. Unfortunately, very few of them have resulted in death. I think there's one case where somebody died because of an adherence attempts. But the challenge that we have is that we're moving into an election where they believe that Trump is the only person that's going to save these kids. And so if Trump loses, that again, in this conspiracy theory, Joe Biden is a part of the cabal of elites that are abusing children. And so there are in those conversations calls to arms. And so along with Trump's militaristic language, we need an army of people at the polls watching, and poll watching is legitimate, but militias are not allowed to do law enforcement activities, private militias. So it's just shaping up to be kind of a dangerous space right now. And he had the opportunity last night to clear the air and say, hey guys, it's not real. I'm not actually, there is no Q. All of this conspiracy is real. And I'm not saying that they would have fully believed him, but it would have stopped some of this. And instead he just played into their playbook. Yeah.
So help me, you got in this a little bit, but help me diagram this, because this is something that's fascinating to me. Yeah, okay, but I'm not, it's not my expertise. So maybe not diagramming Q, but just in general, based on your expertise looking into groups like this, right? Some people I think probably would say, like, there's a lot of soft Q supporters out, so to say they're like, I'm in this group, and to me it just is a signal that I'm for Trump, basically, or it's a signal that I'm against the liberal elites in Hollywood and whatever, and they don't read all the details of all the various conspiracies, and they haven't followed all the Q bombs and all that. And then you have the stuff that you're talking about, which is this sort of violent, potentially violent, or threats of violence that come from from people who have fully bought into that. How is this, to use the old gateway drug analogy, where like people are getting in and then getting radicalized, or is it coming the other way, which is like you've got sort of radical, people that are already radicalized that are kind of using Q, sort of latching onto that as a justification for violence that they already wanted an excuse to commit. It's like, how does this work, and how can somebody, how should somebody, navigate that and talk about that in a way that doesn't, lump all the people in who just kind of liked a Facebook page into this violent ideology? How do you separate them out of that?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because you don't want to fully inadvertently drive somebody deeper into the radicalization process by making them feel like their concerns are not valid. Because a lot of radicalization starts with grievance that is legitimate grievance, legitimate concerns. And then it's twisted and it goes, particularly in the case of Q, it goes kind of into this rabbit hole, and it can get really dark. So on the first piece, you're right. There are a lot of people that kind of view it as a game. They think it's funny. And it's almost more of a symbol of, being against the deep state. But then one of the ways I should have started by answering your question. It's both. You have people that stumble into it and get, deeper radicalized, but then you also have people that are already extremists that are then latching onto other extremist ideology. And that may be what we're seeing in the militia case, that we'll find out as the prosecution moves forward. But some of the people that were arrested that belong to this militia movement most likely have had anti-government extremist viewpoints for some time, but they also were apparently Q adherents. So we'll see what the facts show, but it wouldn't surprise me if they were anti-government first and then saw some commonalities with Q. But the concern I would have is for the mainstream people who tend to be on the right. There are some on the left that get caught up in this, but it is more appealing to people who tend to be right-leaning in their political philosophy. And they often they actually talk about this in their chat rooms. The way to recruit is to start with something innocuous like child sex trafficking. We can all agree that we want child sex trafficking to stop, right? We can all agree that it's a horrible, horrible thing. And if we saw it happening in our neighborhoods, we would do whatever we could to try to protect that child, right? So they often start with real things, and then they create stories that aren't real. And then it kind of leads people. One of the aspects of QAnon is that it kind of creates this game-like environment. It's like a reality, like you get to play and
Right.
piece the pieces of the puzzle together to try to figure out this grand conspiracy. So it's a distraction. We're all stuck at home, and our lives are challenging right now, and there's any number of stressors that we're enduring, from fear of sickness to people actually being sick, to losing people, to losing jobs, to when can my kid go back to Little League or school. Like, these are very real difficult times that we're walking through, and we look for escapes. So, and coping mechanisms in a healthy person, might be, I'm going to exercise more and go for a walk, maybe have a little bit more wine at night. But other coping mechanisms can be, we spend more time on our phones and on Twitter, and that can expose us.
I was shaking yesterday when Twitter was down for an hour. I was getting a little. It was
down. So the reaction, the fact that you have more people online and searching out something to break us out of the difficult moment that we're in is not unexpected. But the challenge is that we haven't had enough voices kind of speaking out and saying, whoa, this is dangerous. This is dangerous to go down this rabbit hole. Find something else more constructive with your time and energy and maybe just don't spend this much time online. But that's
the sad part. Just really quick, Elizabeth. This is the sad part on this. Is like Trump is the person that needs to do, right? I mean, like, they're not listening to other people saying that this is crazy and this is a problem and that you need to step away. It needs to be a credible voice. And it goes, honestly, sort of cheap transition plug here to the RVAT, the whole idea of this, right? That we're trying to convince voters to move off Trump by hearing from people like you and like Miles and like the regular folks who've sent in videos. So that that message can get through to them, right? Because they're not listening to the TV ads, they're not listening to MSNBC, they're not listening to, never Trumpers like me wagging their finger, right? Like they are more likely to listen to, and so that is the same concept. It's more extreme, but the same concept is true with something as dangerous as Q. Like, the president is the one that needs to be like, no, stop this. This is BS. That might actually have an impact.
Exactly. And especially since he is a core part of their ideology. Like, unlike white supremacy or anti-government extremism, Trump actually is a part of the narrative. He is their savior. And he's going to take down, they literally play games. They'll pick apart a speech that he might give, or, the way that he, moved his hands in a rally, and that's clues. He's giving them clues. And so you can, when you watch how they've kind of made this kind of an attractive strategy game, and it makes you feel like I'm seeing something that somebody else isn't. It can feel like it's just fun and games, right? It's a nice distraction. But it is possible, when this is all said and done and social scientists go and evaluate what the heck happened, it's possible that we find that the majority of the people that engaged in it were just looking for a distraction and the humor and the fun of it. But there are consequences, and I think that's really important for people to understand. There are consequences, three main ones that I like to point out. One is it's increasing distrust in our institutions, and that might seem minor, but we already had so little trust in our institutions. The president has made that worse. He's exacerbated. He's created this concept of a deep state. The government just won't work if the people who have empowered it. I mean, our government's whole concept is that it's of, by, and for the people. So if you don't trust it, the appropriate way to handle that is to vote out the people that are in power and put people in power that you do trust. But it's not an option to say, like, the whole thing, I can't trust any of it. It just, like, the system won't work, that we will collapse because it's just not going to work. So trust in institutions is one thing. We have actually seen people carry out or attempt to carry out attacks. So while it's small in number, I am concerned moving into the election period that just really quick on this point. So if you don't mind, just sort of framing this answer, because we have one of the questions, I want to get to everybody's questions, but one of the questions that just came in is right on what you're talking about. It's from Douglas, which is, how would you advise Biden to address the Q in these groups if he gets in? So anyway, so seeing where you're getting, but these three things, like what's a proactive thing that can be done? Well, so it's important for him to speak out against it. He is going to have a harder time doing that because their conspiracy theory is that he's a part of the cabal, right? He's these deep, dark elites. What we really need are Republicans on the right to speak out and say, this is bonkers. There's no truth here. I mean, Congress did this. They passed a resolution. Not too many people probably paid attention to it, but it was bipartisan. Tom Malinowski and Denver Ringel.
Ringelman, he's been great.
Yeah, I mean, they called this out and said, this is not real, and spoke out against it. But I'm so disappointed. It's probably because they haven't paid enough attention and don't understand the danger. But why I don't see enough senators taking this seriously. And if any of their law enforcement or national security type teams are listening, you need to educate your senator about these dangers that I'm talking about. And so it's the trust issue. It's that we're going to see more violence. They have a chance right now to stop it, but we're kind of moving into the territory where we can't fix this. But the third piece is that they're actually impacting the fight against human trafficking. The head of the National Human Trafficking Hotline was on Studio 1A this week on Wednesday. You can go listen to the podcast if you want. And she describes, they announced this back in August, but she describes that their hotline is getting overwhelmed by calls from people that have read something online. Their hotline is designed for victims themselves or people that actually have firsthand knowledge of a human trafficking victim so that they can get that person help. Because their lines are flooded with these reports about QAnon conspiracy theories. And she was very clear, like, clearly these people care. They want to be of help. They're really concerned about potentially that there are kids that are being murdered for their blood to be drunk, and that are being used for pedophilia type acts. I mean, like, they really are concerned. But in the meantime, they're flooding their lines, and real human trafficking victims aren't getting through. And I oversaw human trafficking at the department. Let me tell you that to get a victim to call is very hard. If they don't get through, or if they have to be put on hold, they're likely not going to call again. So there are actual victims that are now being hurt because the conspiracy theories have misdirected legitimate energy and concern. So if you want to have, if you know somebody that is kind of going down the rabbit trail and their hook is this the child sex trafficking thing, direct them to Polaris's website. There's a really great document, a blog that they did that explains, here's how to really detect child sex trafficking, what it really looks like. It is not what QAnon describes. It is not that's not the primary way in which people get trafficked. And then here they give you a list of resources in your local community where you can actually be of help. So help channel that energy into something good as opposed to this fake distraction that is causing harm.
Yeah, I wanted that's really I want to go check that out because I'm interested in this. I want to get into politics though. I know people want to talk about politics, and so I want to tell you a little bit about what RVAT's up to, and then I want to get back to us with one more DHS question about something that's in the news about the fires, but. Right now, I know that the people who are watching this, I'm sure you've seen or maybe even submitted, many of you, videos like the one that Elizabeth and her former Trump colleagues, Olivia Troy and Miles Taylor did, and we've got ones for regular folks all across the country. we have been advertising these at a very high rate across the swing states. That is a very cool stat I just saw this week in Wisconsin. I should have wrote this down. I'm going to get them wrong, I think. No, I think it's Wisconsin, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. The RVAT ads on Facebook have been shown more than any ads by any group except for the two campaigns themselves. So these messages are getting out there to people. It's Facebook for all its problems. It's good. It's easy to target the types of people we're supposed to be getting to on this. And we're about to do another round of going up on TV as well, a final round, probably in Pennsylvania and Florida. We're up in Florida on TV right now, as those are the key states. But Elizabeth, I know you've talked about this before. For people watching, could you just talk about your experience submitting a video, what you've heard, and mainly like how much engagement you get?
Yeah.
This is the key thing. Like, we're doing all these ads, and that's great, but and people are like, well, there are already 1,000 videos. Like, no, we need more videos, because you get in your little circles, you kind of forget how wide your little circles go, right? Like, you hear from second cousins and stuff in other states when you post on Facebook. So anyway, talk a little bit about your experience and what you've heard from people like that.
I mean, I was really nervous to do the video. It was something we wrestled with. We prayed about in my family for a couple of weeks before I decided to speak out, and eventually got the courage to do it. And I was really grateful for Tim and some of the people at RVAT that helped turn that commercial into what it is, and be much more succinct than I was on camera. So poor Tim, I think he felt—
All right, poor Barry. He was going to stay up all night.
But no, but it really, I was shocked at the impact, right? That it struck a chord with people, and I wrote down before we went on this journey, my husband was like, you need to just be very clear about what your purpose is, why you're speaking out, because you'll be asked about lots of different things, and you just need to maintain, like, why are you doing this? And I wrote down, I still have it over on my computer, that my purpose is to share with others my experience so that they feel that they have permission to maybe do something different this time. What I mean by that is I was raised in a Christian home. I've been a conservative all of my life, and I read the talking points, in such a way that, like, it was just ingrained in me. I had certain responses when I would hear things because I just heard it over and over and over again. So when I just had this instinctual moment, somebody asked me last fall, who are you going to vote for? And I said, well, not him. It was this almost, one of those moments that kind of shakes you to the core, because you're like, or existential, because you're like, well, what am I going to do? I mean, how do I, like, all of my life, I have voted for a Republican because I'm pro-life, because I'm pro-Israel, because I am worried about religious liberties. Like, what do I do about this? And it took me months of wrestling with that and praying through that, and reading. I did a lot of reading, people like Tim and other Never Trumpers, and other Christians like David French and the Gospel Coalition, trying to wrestle with, what does the Bible actually say, as opposed to the things that I was told it said, or I was told it, you have to do this because it says this other thing. So I actually just finished, Tim put some finishing touches on an op-ed that I hope gets into a Christian publication at some point soon, laying out some of those other wrestlings, because my hope is that other Christians feel know that they're not alone, that you're not alone in feeling that I need to do something different, that my conscience will not let me do what I did before there's so many reasons, right? But and be able to help people feel like they're not alone. And I think that's what these videos do, is it creates, especially when we're all isolated at home right now, it creates community when we have been told, when you step out, like, the left wants to be mad at me and the right wants to be mad at me, and I'm, there's no community. That's not true. There's so many people that are stepping forward, that are taking a stand and saying, this is not right. I'm not going to stand for this.
That is so right, and you've been so eloquent on this, especially coming from your experience inside Trump, but more your personal experience, as a Christian, as a lifelong Republican. And so I do, if you're watching this and you're a Democrat, you're like, what can I do to help support it? Find, Elizabeth's videos and share those and say, hey, on Facebook, you just get surprised by how much your network extends. And what we've seen is, if you just look at the data, that's why we're spending so much money on ads, because you got to spend a lot of money to get people to watch them, because people don't like watching ads. That's just the nature of the game, right? You tune out, you scroll through them, you scroll down. If it's a person that's sharing a video that says, this is my cousin, this is a woman who I watched on a live stream yesterday and it really moved me, watch this, then people do watch it. People in your networks do watch it. There are people out there that are still kind of wrestling with this, that are, particularly the voters we're trying to reach at RVAT. Maybe that's somebody who can't vote for Joe Biden because of the life issue, but is wrestling with Trump over his anti-life stuff. They might see somebody in here from Elizabeth and just say, I'm just going to sit it out. And while that's not great, we'd rather everybody vote for Biden. That's a win. That's better than voting for Trump, or maybe it's somebody who said, I can't vote for Trump. I hate him. I hate the tweets, but the Democrats, I just can't get there. Find a video of somebody making the case for Biden and share that. That can help. So if you haven't submitted a video, please, please, please do. It does matter, even though we've already had way more than we ever thought we'd get, which is amazing. We'd love to get more. And obviously working with all the other groups like Lincoln and all those other guys on this too, to help spread those. So, and when Elizabeth posts that op-ed, we'll make sure to share that so everybody can share that as well. I want to get to the questions for everybody, but I have one more question from you on your area of expertise. There was some news last night that the fires where I'm at out here in California, that the Trump administration is blocking aid or blocking the emergency designation request from California. Miles Taylor, your colleague at DHS, had testified before that he was on a call with Trump where Trump said he wanted to block aid to the fires because California is a blue state, because Jerry Brown was mean to him, basically. Very pro-life position there. Help people who are struggling from fires getting aid, because he has a little slap fight with Jerry Brown. But what tell us about that? How does that process work? What do you know? What did you think about when you saw the news yesterday? Any sort of insight?
Yeah, first of all, I'm sorry for the people of California. There are occasionally reasons why emergency declarations get denied. So it's not outside the realm of the possibility that something just wasn't of the right proportion, but to get, meet the threshold to get the emergency declaration. And forest fires in particular are more challenging to get that declaration than other types of emergencies because of the way the law is written, strangely. That said, this president has already been on multiple occasions, has indicated both in private and then in some of his rhetoric on the campaign trail that he will give favors to those who vote for him, and he will take away aid for those that don't vote for him. So, Puerto Rico is another great example, right? Puerto Rico does not cast a vote for the presidency, so he didn't really see a need for, why were we all overreacting about the hurricanes hitting Puerto Rico? And so much so that it started to see the time suck that it was. It's, taking it off the messaging he wanted to talk about. So he literally was having conversations about, can we swap it for Greenland? As if people and landmass that's associated, a territory of the United States, is a business deal to be made when, a property has gone to disrepair. It's just.
I always suspected if somebody told them that Greenland was actually not white people, but mostly Inuits, that maybe he would have changed. That might have been less appealing. But it was just a theory. I don't know.
Yeah. His instincts on this are bad, and his and he gets. I think the frustrating thing is if in your first year as president you get told hey, so you can't make decisions to approve or disapprove an emergency disaster declaration based on whether a state voted for you, and he goes, oh, okay, I didn't realize that. You kind of gosh, you're not very smart, but okay, glad you learned, and we'll move on. But he repeats the pattern. This is not just ignorance. This is his frame of reference, is that you help those who are loyal to you, and then you demolish anybody that is not loyal to you. And that's not what the presidency is supposed to be. Like, you're supposed to be president of all of the United States, all of the American people, regardless if they hate your guts. But he does not, that's not his viewpoint of how to steward the government.
Yeah, so if you check the RVAT Twitter, we shared, Miles did an ad on this, a testimony that we were running in Arizona. But, you know, it's another thing you can share if you've got friends who are impacted by the fires, or, you know, who are just humans that care about people who are impacted by fires. Some other questions I saw, you know, Elizabeth brought up this community element, which I think is so true. That I think a lot of people felt very lonely out there, you know, in their politics. It just didn't feel at home with Trumpism, was worried about the left. And that this kind of gave people this, you know, social support to come out. I think that's been one of the coolest things, if not the coolest thing, about what we've done at RVAT. So Aaron in the comments mentioned that they felt that way. So thank you, Aaron. And that leads to a question from Doug, which says, if Biden is elected, what will be the fate of RVAT? I'm worried about the next 2.5 weeks. So that's what I'm worried about. We haven't really had conversations about it because we're worried about winning the election. That's what we're focused on. I'll tell you this, though, RVAT, if you don't know, as a parent nonprofit called Defending Democracy Together that has been fighting on a bunch of fronts, you know, basically for democratic norms writ large, that will still exist. And I know that we will still feel an obligation and a desire to want to kind of cultivate this community in some way after the election. So that'll stay. What our political strategies will be, I think, is TBD. Doug, I think same Doug. Maybe we have a lot of Dougs out there. Who knows? Elizabeth, do you expect any more of your colleagues to come out? We're running out of time.
We are running out of time. It's interesting. I think in some ways, because it looks like Biden's going to win, I think people might be making the calculus that they don't need to go through the pain of being so public about their break with Trump. I think they're missing the big picture. That even though I think yesterday we were encouraging Senator Sass, you know, come out more, and certainly he was pretty significantly bashed for some of his positions of the last 2 years and not taking a stronger stand against Trump. I tend to be of the mindset of come out now, be clear about your concerns about his inability to perform the job. And that's part of the reason I decided to speak out, is the American people deserve to know the facts. And there are many of us in government that were doing things to hold things together so that the government could semi-function appropriately. And I say semi, like there's so many areas of dysfunction, we wouldn't have enough time to go through them. But we were trying to hold it together. And all of us that are coming out to speak are trying to share with you, like, the here's what we were seeing on the inside, so that you understand when you're casting your ballot that this man is incompetent, that he lacks character, and there's nobody left. There's nobody with competence left in the government. So 4 more years of this will lead to much more significant consequences, even more significant than what we've already experienced with the COVID response. So we feel like we are at a devastating moment. You have 600 national security professionals. Many of those are either Republican or were in positions that are considered apolitical, meaning they weren't appointed by one side or the other. They just are civil servants. They never speak out. They view their role as being apolitical and not being, it's like a tainted thing. They don't want to be seen as partisan. They feel like it is of such weight that our country is in such dire circumstances that they have broken that rule to speak out and say they're voting for Biden and they can't support Trump. So when you have all of that happening, my plea would be to people in Congress, senators and congressmen, as well as those that are still in the administration, come out now. You never know how your voice might impact a voter. We can't assume that Biden's going to win. We need to keep fighting.
Didn't we learn this lesson 4 years ago?
I know. So come out, and then yes, you're going to get criticized. I've been criticized. I've been speaking out for 2 months, and every day I get a hate tweet about how stupid must I have been to vote for him in the first place. You're like, okay, sure, but I care more about my country and making sure that Donald Trump loses this election. So it is worth enduring those trolls in order to get the truth out there. And I tell you, on the other side of this, when we have to rebuild the party, you're gonna have a seat at the table. Maybe people will feel like you should have done more. You can deal with that after the election, but you'll have an opportunity to have a seat at the table when we rebuild the party. If you stay in, then you will forever be Trumpism. And I, for one, am going to be fighting tooth and nail that the Republican Party rejects Trumpism and we carve out a new conservative approach that is compassionate and cares treats people with human dignity, which I think is the antithesis of Trumpism. So now is the time to lay your cards on the table. You've done the best you could to hold the government together, to play nice so that you can do other good things. But there's 2.5 weeks left. Time to come out.
I agreed with like 98.5% of that. That was a wonderful rant. I'm a little bit more pessimistic than you about whether they'll have a seat at the table. I'm worried that the table will still be pretty Trumpy even if he loses. But at
that point, I'm starting my own party. We'll go.
And I'm happy that you're in the fight. I'm happy you're in the fight. There's also a pretty big difference between what you've done, which has blown me away, and what Ben Sasse did, because. Yeah. You know, is Ben still voting for Trump? I'm not sure. We didn't give kind of a clear answer on that. He did say he didn't like him, which was nice. I appreciated his comments. His comments were all right on. I'm a little. I felt like there's like one more little step I'd like. Maybe I'm getting a little. All
right. So we're like fanboys of Ben Sasse in this family because my husband's from Nebraska. And he's, like if you were to see him, he goes to work now upstairs and wears his Nebraska red hat. Like, so he's a big fan of Ben Sasse. This is a really good book. This describes why we hate each other and what we need to do to heal. I want voices like that at our table, acknowledging both, the contributions of the right and the many contributions on the right that have led us to this devastating point in our history, but also, hopefully encouraging those on the left to also learn better ways of interacting with one another so that we don't end up back in this space. So my plea is still for people like Senator Sasse, like Senator Romney, to be more clear about where they stand so that they can help lead us on the other side of this devastating.
Well, he probably has a better chance listening to you than me at this point. So, or your husband is a Nebraska man. So maybe just send him a little note. Be like, I'm not even asking for Biden. I'd love to get him to a Biden, but Nebraska 2, is he in the 2nd district? I don't know where his house is, but Nebraska 2, we actually did some RVAT ads in Nebraska 2 because it's not totally impossible that it could matter in a very, in a terrible, because Nebraska has this electoral college thing where each district gets one electoral college vote. So in an event where I'm going from memory now, so something in the comments could say if I'm wrong, but if Trump was to win, I believe it's Florida, Wisconsin, and Arizona, and then Biden wins the other swing states, then Nebraska 2 could actually matter. So I'm not giving him a pass. He's not living in Idaho, which doesn't matter at all. It could matter, and just give me a write-in for Jeb or whatever, whoever he wants. Write-in, whoever his philosophical heroes are, Oakshott. That's fine. But anyway, send him a little note. Agreed with all he said. I just felt like there was one more sentence I was hoping for. Maybe I'm getting greedy. Elizabeth, let's see. Do we have any other questions? I don't want to take away. Christine's last question is, I think, maybe metaphysical. Why did it take so long for people to come out against Trump? Look, I'll close this, and Elizabeth, if you have any final thoughts, because it is about what RVAT's about, which is tribalism is powerful. Mm-hmm. It's a big loss. If you watch the RVAT videos, sometimes they feel almost like therapy, right? Because it's like a big personal loss to say that this something that's been part of me my whole life is not part of me anymore. It's like, it's similar to when I think Catholics after the church scandal, how some Catholics felt, and a lot of people who There's a guy that sent an RVAT video who named his daughter Reagan. It's like this is that big a part of the party. I mean, one of my profile names is like Tim Miller GOP. Like it's part of your identity, and to give that up, it's tough. It's hard, mentally to get over that. That's just human nature. And so that's why we've done the program like we've done it. And I think that's what explains why it's taken a lot of people so long. But we are seeing movement. The numbers, if you look at Pennsylvania, the number of former Republicans voting for Biden is crazy. It's like a quarter in certain areas in the Pittsburgh and Philly suburbs. So it is working. We are winning people over, and I think that's the reason why we can do a deep psychology dive on that after we beat them, hopefully. But that's my Elizabeth. Any parting thoughts for everybody?
Oh, those of you that have tuned in, it's probably because you're in some form of support of RVAT, and I just want to thank you. The folks in this community have been beyond encouraging, and I just personally appreciate that. There is a lot of hate from other sides, but it's really nice. To your point, like tribalism is kind of dangerous, but then the good part is when we have organizations like this, we're able to find community where we weren't quite expecting it. So thank you for those of you that have been encouraging.
Thanks, everybody. We've got how many more of these? 2. We've got at least 2 more. We might have a special bonus one with the special guests, TBD. So 2, 3, 4, maybe we'll do one on election day too, to give everybody something a little outlet for their nerves. I don't know. I just made that promise now, so Megan, don't be mad at me. Thank you guys so much. Post the posts on Facebook. Give $5 to RVAT PAC so we can keep being at the top of the Facebook ratings and YouTube ratings for how much money we're spending. We thank you all so much. Thank you, Elizabeth, so much. I'm so grateful. We'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you. Have a good one.